My Dark Elder army has been going swimmingly. I have about 500 in-game points finished, and Scott the Miniature Maniac and I have been putting together our Dark Elder armies in tandem. And looking at our scoring sheet for this slow grow campaign, you get points for painting, building, and adding additional interesting accoutrement to your models, and I have scored 69 points. And that's how I know this army was meant to be, because I didn't plan that. It just ended up being 69, and that is perfect. It is time now to move into phase 2 of my Dark Elder army, and that is trying out some of the other flavors of Drukhari. And it's gonna take a lot of converting. Pulling these units out of my pile of shame, I absolutely love the look of the racks. No one can actually buy grotesques at the moment, thanks Games Workshop, but I found some interesting and similar monsters from RTLW, and the Talos/Kronos, it's fine. I like a lot of things about it, but it looks a little wimpy, or should I say, shrimpy. I don't like the long scorpion tail, and I wish it had legs so it was more closely related to the grotesques. Now I hear some of you asking, Jay, where are you gonna get giant stitched together grotesque humanoid legs? Well, Age of Sigmar came through for me. Skaven Stormfiends. I'm taking this box and a couple of these boxes and sticking them together. These rats are huge and about the right size, I hope, to meld these models together. It's like I myself am the homunculus, doing the evil flesh crafting to make the perfect killing machine. I made up the rat body and clipped off the torso of the Talos. Looking at them side by side, the legs are about right, but the Talos has a ridiculously skinny little wasp waist. I'll have to slim down this rat. I carved him in half at the waist, and then I clipped off the decorations hanging off of his belt. Then I took the Talos' butt and carved away the original connection points, and then I moved back to the rat's butt and carved away the tail. I glued on the rest of his skirt and then started dremeling, removing as much of his waist as I can until I could get the Talos' butt to fit over the rat's butt. Once I finally got it on there, I filled in his hollow belly with some tinfoil that I packed down and then smoothed over this spot with some milliput. After that, I squished the Talos onto it and officially joined the two kits. I finished gluing together the Talos bits, getting the arms attached and his weird big carapace, and he's ready for war gear. That was definitely tricky, but I do love my legged pain engine. And what are the pain engines? They are the masterpieces of the homunculus. They're true artistic expression made manifest. On the tabletop, they are just a super solid unit. They come in two flavors, the Talos and the Kronos. And the Kronos, the cheaper of the two, might be one of the best units in all of 40K. They have an epic stat line. They are 7 wounds of toughness 7 with a 3-up save, a 6-up invulnerable save, and a 5-up feel no pain. All that wrapped together for 50 points is an absolute bargain. They are upsettingly annoying to take off the board, and even though the war gear isn't amazing, just 2 flappy little tentacle arms, they can bully light to medium infantry pretty darn good and just be a really annoying tar pit for my opponents. Now, the Talos, on the other hand, is essentially the same unit, but with tons and tons of war gear options. How many war gear options? They pick 3 of 9 unique war gear options. Now I gotta pick what those are gonna be. On the Scorpion Tail, I can take Stinger Pods, Heat Lances, Splinter Cannons, or the Haywire Blasters. And for the arms, there are the Talos Gauntlets, the Chain Flails, the Ichor Injectors, the Macro Scalpels, and the Twin Liquefier Gun. I think I'm gonna build mine for roughing up vehicles, and I might as well take the Twin Liquefier Gun for putting the hurt on some light infantry if they get too close. I glued on the arm and I didn't even think about it, but I got really lucky that this arm isn't longer than his new legs. He has a gorilla stance, walking on the knuckles of his twin flamers. Now for the Talos Gauntlet, which is essentially a power fist. I don't really like the look of the hand, so I'm just gonna go with the Macro Scalpel. I feel like all the close combat weapons look about the same, so I'm just gonna go with my favorite. There's some really cool engineering in this kit to get the blades to swivel up and down. Now for his decorations. I glued on his roof rack containing his extra blood and favorite skulls and his spooky scary mask. Now that I'm looking at this fella nearly finished, I think I know how I want to deal with the tail. I cut off one of his racks and then I'm going to put the tail coming out of his back. I smoothed out the holes in his armor with more milliput and drilled a hole that I dremeled out to be big enough to house the tail. I put paper towel inside the chest, dripping super glue on it to make it into a hard surface so I can fill in the exhaust ports, and then I cleaned up the hole with some more milliput. And while I had some fresh putty on the desk, I fixed up his legs, smoothing his skirt into the Talos' butt armor. The end of the tail fit into my new hole, and I think this is a much better look than the old shrimp tail. I think he's much more imposing now. He looks like a bruiser. And there's one thing I've almost forgotten, his butt. I took a hole punch and made a small circle of plastic card to hide his privates, and I drilled a small hole in the middle to receive a hilarious little handle I found in the Storm Vermin kit. This way, the homunculus can access this component if they need to. And the Talos kit comes with a ton of extra little close combat weapons. These will look great, but I'm gonna paint them in sub-assembly to make it easier on myself. I think the Talos should have these arms as another close combat weapon, maybe surgical arms, extra attack 6, strength 2, AP 0, damage D3. My leggy Talos is complete. But do I paint him or do I work on the bases? Paint him or bases? I guess before I do either, I should tell you about today's sponsor, Raycon. Raycon earbuds are perfect for when I really need to get into the painting zone, with tunes from Oingo Boingo or the B-52s, or listening to the latest audiobooks from the Black Library. I'm currently making my way through Assassinorum Kingmaker and the esteemed literary masterpiece, The Zombie Survival Guide. I can't be distracted during my 14-hour painting sessions every day, and Raycon earbuds make it easy to stay focused and on task. Once I set them into my ear, I hardly feel them there, and they stay in place the whole day. And now with the all-new water resistance, I don't have to worry about the occasional accidental splash. These robust earbuds can handle it. The only break I take from listening is to whip up my daily egg salad sandwiches, and that is more than enough time for the Raycons to charge with their new quick charge function. Raycon earbuds are reliable, efficient, and everything you could want in a pair of wireless headphones. When you buy today, you'll get a pair of Raycon everyday earbuds, 5 pairs of extra gel tips, a charging case, and cord. So click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/EonsBattle to get 20% off your Raycon purchase plus free shipping. To get my Haemonculi Coven miniatures on bases, I need to build those bases. I do custom resin bases for each and every single guy. I do no rim, which is the thing I'm doing just for this army, and I think it looks pretty darn slick. But these guys are on some different size bases, so I gotta do some new castings. I've built a new 60mm base to complement the 2 I already have molds for. This will give me a nice variety, and I'm nearly done with 3 40mm bases, all built out of slate rock and milliput. It takes quite a while to make these, but once I have one, I can make a mold with it and then have infinite. Now, one mistake I made while making up these 40mm bases is on this one, I sculpted it with just the yellow part of milliput. Like you mix the yellow and the gray, and then after a few hours it gets hard. I only did the yellow part on this one. So this is just soft clay, but it should be fine. That actually should work fine because once I cast it, as long as the mold turns out, it doesn't really matter what happens to these. It's nice to have the original because if I ever break the mold or it wears out, I can redo the casting, but this should get me through the day. I cut up poster board making little boxes to go around each base, and then to make them waterproof, I put clear packaging tape over the inside parts of the mold and glued them together with hot glue. To make these bases, I put them on the same peel and stick magnets I put under them, so they are the perfect size, and I can peel and stick them down now inside of my molds. All right, I've got my molds ready to go, and I've got my silicone for making the molds. I've already made 2 60mm molds and 1 big old flappy dappy mold that makes 8 28.5mm bases. I only have 8 ounces of silicone left. I really hope that is gonna be enough to make these 2 molds happen. To figure out how much silicone I'll need, I filled both molds up with sand. Then I poured that amount of sand into a cup, and I made a line right at the T in Taco Bell. I replaced that much sand with water to get the weight, and I put this onto my scale to get the final total. To do exactly what I wanted, I needed 10.5 ounces. I've only got 8. But I really want to use up that 8. This stuff is pretty pricey and it doesn't last long. It's going bad and I don't want to buy more. So I might just go for it with 8 ounces and hope for the best. I poured every last drop of silicone rubber into my cup and started mixing. It turns out it had already started to go bad, and there was a fair bit of dry, gunky rubber in the bottom of both jars, so I didn't even end up with my full 8 ounces. I went slow and poured the silicone around my 40mm bases. I only had enough to do 1 mold. My grotesques are gonna get to stand on bases, assuming that this turns out, but I bet it will. And I'm gonna have to buy more of this stuff to do my last 60. And I guess I always needed to buy more because I need to do 32mm bases for the Reavers and the Hellions. So I'm gonna clean up and then work on my racks. I love the look of these racks, and I'm really excited because on the back of the box, it says it comes with extra bits to make rack crew members for the Drukhari vehicles. Looking at the instructions, it looks like it's extra pilot arms, but to get them on vehicles, you do have to waste the bodies. Kind of a bummer, but I still might turn one box into crew members just for the coolness factor. The racks build really easily and have a lot of fun options. Tons of little syringes and test tubes to glue onto their weird horny backs, and a lot of great weapon options. In 10th edition, the edition of free war gear, you might as well take every weapon. And as I wrapped up these racks, my mold is ready. I tore apart the mold jacket and carefully peeled out the original bases, and it looks like they cast perfectly. The one with the wet milliput did leave behind a lot of goo, but I bet it's fine. I poked away as much as I could, and I bet the rest of it comes out with the first cast. Other than that, it looks like my grotesques are gonna have some bases. I mixed up equal parts of quick curing white resin and put a drop of black casting ink to tint the resin black. I mixed these together and had about 1 minute working time to get these molds filled up. I used a disposable paintbrush to push the resin into the sharp little corners of the mold, and after about 10 minutes, the mold was rock hard. I pulled out the casts and they look perfect. And I was right, all the milliput gunk got pulled out of the mold by the resin, and now I can just scrub the hard resin clean with a toothbrush. I sanded the bottom of the bases smooth and stuck on my magnets, and now I have enough custom bases for my entire coven. It worked! I'm so happy. I've got all of the bases built, I've got all of the models built, it is time to paint. And what colors! I love the look of just the generic color scheme of the racks, this pallid, bone-colored flesh, and these incredibly restrictive corsets and blood-colored weapons. But if I turn the box over, I get the alt color scheme, and I think I like that one even more. Flayed flesh or fleshless skin, these weird muscle men of literal muscle just walking across the battlefield, gushing blood. And you might think that's incredibly silly to be wandering across a battlefield grievously injured, but that just means they're gonna need more blood. And what better place to find more blood than on a battlefield? I started by giving all the models a Zenithal Prime, and because of the weird proportions and spiny projections, they look really dramatic already with just a black and white values. I can't resist any longer, I need to apply the blood. I used some Scale 75 Health Red, a contrast paint-like color, and that flowed beautifully over their flesh. Then I highlighted all the flesh with thin lines of a pastel yellow along each muscle group, and in 2 quick steps, the muscles were done. Now for the skirt, and I'm thinking leather, and one of my new favorite finds for leather is Games Workshop Contrast Gargox Sewer. I put this over the cloth and their wristbands, which made for a dark leather with a little bit of texture. And I want to make them look well worn. I took an earth brown and made small scraggly edge highlights on all the seams and painted on tons of tiny scratches running all in different directions. Then I repeated this process again with tan. My favorite type of painting is when things come together quickly, so I want to keep experimenting. I put Army Painter Speed Paint Broadsword Silver over the weapons and what little armor they have, and this didn't provide a ton of contrast, but it did allow the Zenithal to shine through. I shaded the metal with 2 coats of Nuln Oil and a dry brushing of silver paint on the tops of each weapon and on the face of their helmets. And I put Rattling Grime over their pants and hoods. I thinned down Skeleton Horde contrast paint 50/50 and put this over their horns and did a dry brushing of white to brighten these up. Now they're so close to being done. I moved on to the blood using some Blood for the Blood God technical paint on their tools and tubes. They are ready to get emergency blood transfusions in the middle of battle. And I put this over their weapons too, making them look like they've seen some serious action. Looking at the finished models, there was one little thing I wanted to add, and that is a little airbrush spritzing of Rattling Grime on the tips of their horns to make them just that much hornier. And last but not least, the Hex Rifle needs some attention. I painted the barrel black and then thinned down some red paint and a little flow aid and then dripped it into the cracks. I wish more Dark Eldar stuff had this sort of texture to them because they aren't hard to paint and they look great. But you know what else looks great? That's right, our Patreon. This month we have the Pestilent Forest, a table's worth of grotesque yet beautiful terrain pieces that let you fight your tabletop battles surrounded by the corrupting influence of decay. Huge eye plants, cauldrons of pestilence, rotting creep, and the Great Maw makes for a very chaotic environment. Oh, I really like the racks. I like the racks a lot. They were so much fun to build, so much fun to paint. Like they look like an absolute mess of detail. But the details are so easy to paint, just a little bit of leather with micro scratches, their weird flesh painting on the veins. They were really fun to do. My army list doesn't currently have any racks in it, but that might change because I really enjoy these guys. And they're not bad in game. They sit right between the witches and the Cabalites. They're not as stabby as the witches, they're not as shooty as the Cabalites, but one thing that they do have is the ability to die. Their special ability is if they kill something, I get a pain token. They're not gonna kill anything. But if they die, I still get a pain token. Having like 2 squads of 5 of these guys on the board might be the trick because I can probably trick my opponent into killing these guys. I don't care, they're only 60 points. It won't turn the game one way or the other. But having an extra pain token in my next turn, that's kind of valuable. And now that I've enjoyed the racks, it is time to move up a size into the Grotesques. The Grotesques are not Eldar, but prisoners who've been experimented on by the Haemonculi until they are loyal and powerful servants of the Cabal. These guys are basically identical to the Wracks, but with way more muscles. Instead of moving straight to pastel yellow like the Wracks, I did an in-between layer of light pink lines to make the veins and muscles even more pronounced. Then I painted all the metal with Army Painter Broadsword Silver and a wash of Nuln Oil and a dry brushing of silver paints. And I did their loincloths and booty shorts with exactly the same recipe as the Wrack skirts. To finish them off, a little red gore on all their test tubes and arcane vials. The Grotesques are pretty cool, a nice little bully unit, 12 wounds at strength 5 for a little squad of 3. They're not bad at all, but they could be better, and they could be better really easily. Games Workshop, if you're looking for any suggestions when the Dark Eldar Codex comes out, let me join a homunculus to this squad. It would be perfect. They would be the perfect little bodyguard unit for a homunculus, making it way tougher to kill them, letting them hit just a little bit above their weight class. It would be perfect. But speaking of a unit that does hit above their weight class, it's time to work on that Talos. I threw on all my base coats using everything I've learned from the Wracks and Grotesques and picked out some of their forearm armor with bone color to make them even more monstrous looking. Now, the Talos doesn't have the little muscle ridges that the Wracks and Grotesques do, so I have to freehand the meaty muscle patterns over his body, but he doesn't have too much exposed skin, so it wasn't a big deal. And to tackle his skirt, I used a sponging of brown and tan instead of doing it all by hand like I did on the Wracks. Now I want to try something with the Broadsword Silver. I mixed in a little Army Painter Strong Tone to try and get the contrast to be more dramatic. It worked a little, but for my next experiment, I'll try mixing Speed Paint Black into the paints. Once that was dry, I gave all the metal a coat of Nuln Oil and then a heavy dry brushing of silver, using rattling grime in my airbrush to create some subtle shadows on the big smooth armor sections. Even though he is huge, he really is just a Wrack. I'm already on to picking out his tubes and bottles with blood for the Blood God. He's getting darn close, so I glued on his little buggy arms, which make him look even grosser. The Talos are sent out to find more test subjects for the homunculus. I bet these are the little arms that carry them. I put a drop of blood for the Blood God on the tip of my airbrush and then blasted it over the model to get a random spray, going back in with my paintbrush to make some spots a little bit bigger. Now, the only thing left is to get him on a base. And one tricky thing is that one of his legs is floating just a little bit off the base, but I have a solution. I glued a big old grass tuft right where his foot needs to go, and then I lathered up his foot and squished it into the tuft. This mushed together static grass mixed with superglue will make for a very solid connection, and I stuck down the rest of the Cabal to their bases, adding a healthy amount of my neon grass tufts. The bloody, bleedy wing of my Dark Eldar army is finished. Actually, it's just begun. Because to stay on track and to stay to my schedule, I have to do this like 3 more times in the next 2.5 months, but I can do it. I've also been painting these guys completely separate from the rest of my Dark Eldar army, and I kind of want to see what they all look like together. I broke from my rule of pink and blue for my Dark Eldar, but it works. And the Haemonculi Coven is a different thing than normal Dark Eldar. And it still works because they're still fun, exciting colors, like they're bloody, bloody red, and they still look good alongside the rest of my Cabal. Although, not many points. I finished 3 whole units right here. It's like 200 points in game. It's nothing. Everything on this table is only 700, a little bit over 700 in-game points. Dark Eldar are cheap. But in terms of the project, I still managed to get 29 points finished. Adding it on to my 69 already finished points, I have 98 points in Scott and my Slow Grow Escalation League, so I'm still well on track. I'm gonna paint many more Wracks and different Dark Eldar units. Oh yeah, I'm a Dark Eldar player now.